Hello, welcome to our Facebook Live. We're delighted to have two brilliant best-selling authors here today, Amanda Reynolds and Jackie Kabler, who will be talking about their most recent releases, The Assistant and The Vanishing Class of 3B, alongside all things writing. Please ask any questions you might have in the comments below. Amanda and Jackie will do their best to answer as many as they can during or after the live. Amanda and Jackie were both, absolutely delighted to have you on this live. So I'm going to set you off and just ask, how did you both get to know one another? And then I'm going to disappear and let you have a good natter. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I should say that Jackie and I are perfectly capable of having a good natter, aren't we? Because we have got to know each other. Can you remember how we first met?
Well, I mean, basically, there's a big group of lovely Gloucestershire authors. There's a lot of well-known authors actually who live around here, aren't there? So we both live in Gloucestershire, and there's people like Katie Ford and Kate Reardon and Dinah Jeffries, and I mean the list goes on, lots and lots of really well-known authors. And somehow they were in a group, and I got invited to join in the group. And I think I just met you at one of the coffee mornings or something like that. But it's such a lovely group, isn't it? And we do have a laugh, but it's all very supportive and nice as well.
It is really nice. I think I might have actually been the culprit who set the group up.
Oh.
I was trying to remember how long ago it was, but it's quite a few years, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a good maybe 3-4 years maybe. I can't remember, Amanda. I don't know. Ages.
I was a little bit starstruck when I met you, Jackie, because for those people who don't know Jackie, she's a familiar face to many, I would say, because of your TV background. So did you want to tell everybody a little bit about that and kind of like pre-writing as well, what you were doing?
Yeah, I mean, I was my sort of main career for 20 years was as TV news reporter. So I think most people who know who I am would know me from GMTV when it was GMTV back in the day, because I was there for 10 years and I covered a lot of stories around the world, things like I was in Washington for President Clinton's impeachment trial, and I covered Madeleine McCann and the Sower murders and famine in Ethiopia and the Asian tsunami, and lots of really big stories over a 10-year period there. But I was a news reporter for 20 years. So I worked for the BBC in Birmingham, and I worked for ITN in London and all sorts of places. So I do still occasionally get recognised for my news career. But I left it quite a while ago, and I left it 10 years ago. And I work for a shopping channel now, which is the best fun job I've ever had. I work for QVC, the shopping channel, and instead of talking about murder and politics, I talk about shoes and handbags, which is brilliant. And I write, of course, and my writing, sort of kicked off in the last 10 years as well. So yeah, it's been an interesting little career change.
Yeah, definitely. So how did you get started? I know we're both going to talk a little bit about this. We're going to go first about how you started.
I'll go. All right,
your writing,
and I'm going to start questioning you, Amanda, as well.
Because I can literally ask you stuff all night.
So is it? Oh, I can hear a very loud bird song. Is that coming from your house as well?
It's lovely. Is it too loud because I can close?
No, it's lovely. It's a lovely backdrop.
They are literally outside my window, and I'm just like used to them, and I quite like it. But if it's intrusive, let me know.
No, it's lovely. It's lovely. So how did I start writing? I started writing when I was working for GMTV, and I was traveling the world all the time. And being honest, my last few years, I just wasn't very happy, and I'd had enough almost of traveling all the time. And I mean, not complaining, it was an amazing job, but there were times when I just wanted to come home. I was never at home. I never saw my husband. I never saw my family. And I started writing just as a distraction almost from that. And I thought, well, I've got a lot of experience of years of news stories, so maybe I could do something with some of them. So I started writing this frankly awful book about a TV news reporter who got involved with it started as a TV news reporter traveling all the time and looking for love, so it was kind of a rom-com, and it was awful, it was dreadful. And I wrote it, and I got no interest whatsoever from agents and publishers, and I forgot about it and put it away and thought, well, I clearly can't write. And then a few years later, when I left news, I took it out again. I thought I'd really like to write, so I changed the book completely and put a murder in at the beginning. And then that kind of got me a small publishing deal. So that's kind of where it all kicked off for me. And then a few years down the line, I changed genre to psychological thrillers, and that's when it really kicked off. But we can talk more about that. So it was, one of those typical, I think, for many authors, not very good starts, write a terrible book, forget about it, and then try again. And it kind of took a few years to get started. What about you? Because you had a bit more of a successful start, I feel, than that, didn't you?
Well, I suppose it might look that way. It wasn't really. It was quite similar to you. I am going to close the window, sorry, because it was so loud. I can hardly hear myself. So yeah, it was quite similar in a way, in that I also was in a job. I was working in teaching actually, and I'd done various things when the kids were young, and sort of thought that I didn't ever really know what I wanted to do, but writing was always something that I loved. And I suppose in a way I felt that one day I'd come back to that when I had more time. It's always the thing, when I've got more time, I'll do it. But nobody ever asks you to write a book, and you sort of have to give yourself permission in a way to do that. And I think that as children got older and I was not enjoying my work particularly, and I thought, okay, I'm going to have to, if I'm going to do it, I was in my 40s, and I started to think, well, I need to do things in my 40s, because if I get to my 50s and I haven't done them, maybe I won't. So I did a big roller coaster. Terrified myself on that, and I was just sort of doing these stupid things, thinking,
an actual roller coaster. I thought that
actual
was
roller coaster, yeah, actual
the
Hulk in Florida. Yeah, wow. Terrified myself. So I started like trying to just make a decision to be a bit braver about things, I think, and also a little bit selfish, which I think sometimes we find hard. And carve out a little bit of time. And I also made this dramatic statement when I left work, because they said, oh, why are you leaving? We would like you to stay. And I said, I've got to write a book. I'm writing a book. I've got to finish it. And I thought, well, if I do that, if I've made this public declaration of intent, and I've got to then go ahead and do it. So I did, and I signed up for a really nice class that we met on a Friday, and I met some good friends there as well, and that was lovely, because it was a kind of social thing as well as giving myself permission, because I had to do homework every week and then go back and read this short story or whatever we'd been asked to write. I found that I couldn't write poetry. I definitely still rather write a whole book than a poem. But it really did stretch me. It was a very, very good class, and it made me also see that you didn't have to live in London. You didn't have to necessarily be connected to publishing in order to break through, because people who were at the class, there was actually a really good success rate of people who were getting agents and starting to get interest in publishers. And I thought, gosh, maybe this is something that you can actually not necessarily earn a living from, but you can certainly earn, a part-time income from. So maybe I should think about doing that. So I then upped my game a little bit and became a bit more serious, and said, I am actually going to finish this book. I'm not just going to go to classes and talk about being a writer. I'm going to be a writer. And like you, I wrote a truly abysmal, I'm sure yours wasn't, but mine definitely was, abysmal crime novel, because I just loved reading crime and it seemed the natural thing to write. But it was more of a sort of I can't even remember, there was a male and a female detective. I remember that much. And they were like going around for no apparent reason, interviewing all these different people. It was very, very poor. But what it did was got me into the process of how to try to get an agent. I got somebody rejected everywhere it was sent. But I'd started a process, I suppose, in myself of taking myself a little bit more seriously. And I then wrote another book and spent a lot more time on it, and, had learned a lot from it. And actually that got me an agent. So that's how I started in the whole publishing thing. But, it wasn't quick for me. It took me quite a long time, not only like in life to get to the point where I wrote, and to get an agent took a while, to get a publisher took a long while after that. So, I suppose from the outside, because people only become aware of you as a writer when you are in that position, then it might look like it's a bit quicker process than it actually is. And I think in a way, I try really hard, as I know you did, to be quite transparent about that, because it's very hard if you're trying to suddenly think everyone else can do it and I can't, and that really isn't the case.
It really isn't. I mean, I have a stack of rejections from agents and publishers as well, and also I think, you know, there's a lot of hoo-ha often about the young authors, the debut authors who are in their 20s maybe, and I think both of us are examples of people who didn't get there till much later. I mean, I was 48 when I got my first publishing deal and 49 when my book came out, my first book came out. So yeah, it took a while, but, you know, we got there in the end. But it's not easy. And for anyone, you know, watching who may be struggling and getting rejected, just keep going. You know, you do develop a thicker skin. It really hurts actually at first, doesn't it? All the rejections, but you kind of get used to it, and it's so worth it when eventually you get there.
Oh yeah, it's that carrot and stick thing, isn't it? And also the thing I do like about that is that there is always opportunity. I do honestly feel that publishing is very egalitarian. It is absolutely about the writing. No one ever said to me, I don't have a university degree, and I don't think, do you have a university degree, Jackie?
I do, but I had the opposite kind of thing where people thought that because I was in telly or on telly, that it would be much easier, that I'd have all these contacts and I just felt you know, walk into a book deal, and it wasn't like that at all. I had zero contacts in the publishing industry. The two industries are not linked, and I wasn't famous. I was just a news reporter, and so I had just as many rejections, if not more actually, than many of my friends.
That's really interesting, because I think maybe perception would be that you are incredibly well connected, and that helped, but it didn't make any difference.
It made no difference. And in fact, I think, you know, when I got my first publishing deal and my second one, I don't think they actually knew what I did for a living until I told them, and then they were like, oh, okay. But yeah, it didn't, I genuinely don't think it made any difference. And my stack of rejection is just as long as yours, if not longer, I'm sure, than yours is.
Spreadsheet, and then it became quite dispiriting, and I stopped the spreadsheet. But what I did do, I did keep records, obviously, because you don't want to like bother people if they've already seen something. But also I always made sure that I had irons in the fire. So even when I got a rejection, I would send another one out. So I always had that hope. I don't know if that was helpful at times. It was quite crushing at times, naturally. But now I was going to say about university degree as well, because I did feel quite sort of I didn't go to university, and I did feel at the time, oh, maybe, you know, publishing is going to expect that, you know, perhaps my CV should be that I have a journalistic background or some kind of writing background or a university degree that is applicable. And I always talk now about trying to build a CV in terms of your writing, not in terms of your education or your experience. And, you know, things like entering short story competitions, and if you get longlisted, that sort of thing, just to show that you really are serious. It's like any dream job, isn't it? If you apply for it, you try to sort of build your CV, and that's what I did, and that really helped, because those little successes along the way, you know, if you did sort of get a long listing for a short story and someone actually said they enjoyed your writing, you know, it's like, oh, okay, maybe there is something here, you know. It's just those little rewards along the way.
I totally agree. I mean, I do have a university degree, but it's in zoology, which is not really, hasn't been terribly helpful, I have to say. I mean, very interesting, but not terribly helpful. And even as a journalist, it's very, very different writing, you know, a 500-word newspaper article or a 2-minute TV news script is completely different to writing a book. So I'm not entirely sure if that helped me. I think the only thing it helped me with is meeting deadlines, because, you know, as a news reporter, deadlines are absolute. The news is on at 6 o'clock. You have to be ready for 6 o'clock. And so I've never missed a writing deadline. I'm very, very good at keeping to deadlines. But anyway, so we've had sort of an interesting start then, and we both did. You know, it wasn't easy, I'd say, for either of us, but here we are. Now you've got the list of questions that we're supposed to do, and I haven't.
I do.
I failed on that one.
So the next one says, tell us. This is a really hard one, I'll just warn you. Okay. Tell us a little bit about your most recent book.
You go first.
Okay, so my most recent book is called The Assistant. And I have to say, much like Jackie, I think, my head is in my next book, because I'm writing my next book. So we then have to cast our minds back to our previous book. So The Assistant is about a woman called Gail, who is a more mature lady. She's in her 50s. She's not old, she's more mature. and she applies for a job as an executive assistant to an influencer who lives in this beautiful Georgian mansion in the middle of Belgravia, in the middle of London, and her name is Larissa. And Larissa Riss, as she is known to her many followers, lives her life on Facebook, social media, Instagram, Twitter. So everything that she does, everything that she eats, everything that she buys, and there's a lot of things that she buys because she's incredibly wealthy thanks to her husband, all gets shared. And that's how she kind of lives her life. And Gail is the absolute antithesis of Riss. She claims to have no interest or very little interest in social media, not to really understand it, but she is meticulous, and she becomes very important to Riss because she takes control of all the things that Riss doesn't want to deal with. She deals with all of her admin. She lives in the basement of the Georgian mansion, and she looks after every whim of Riss's, and very quickly becomes indispensable. But as I'm sure readers are aware from reading Psychological Suspense, there is more to this than meets the eye. So as Riss's world starts to unravel, we also begin to realise that Gail is there for her own reasons, and maybe she hasn't been entirely truthful when she applied for the job, and perhaps she has something that she wants from Riss, shall we say. So that's a little bit about the assistant. And I have to say that although I've said my head is in my next book, my heart is still very much with that book, because I really loved writing it. I enjoy writing, but sometimes it's harder than others. But the assistant and Gail are still very close to my heart.
And it is a brilliant book. I loved it so much, and my husband also loved it, as I've told you, Amanda. I said you're going to like this book because he's a bit funny about what he reads. He likes things to be a bit kind of gritty and a bit action packed and all of that, and he wasn't sure, and I said, read it, just read it. And he went away for a few days and he took it, and he messaged me and said, you're right, it's really good. So yeah, we both really enjoyed it. It's a brilliant book. No, it's brilliant. All your books have been brilliant, but it's really
and I have to say, this is going to say like I'm just repeating back to you what you've just said to me, but you know that I loved Vanishing of Class 3B because I was so lucky. I was the first person
the
to read it.
Person after my editor. Yeah, you were like literally the first person outside my publisher to read it.
So I was reading it on my Kindle because Jackie had very kindly sent it to me, and I just felt I had to keep messaging you. I put it, here she is again. So I was like, oh my God, it's so good. I'm absolutely loving it. You were like, that's so good to hear because you're the first one to read it.
I was so scared. Do you know how scared we all get really scared, I think, when a new book's coming out, and I just wasn't sure I could pull this off. I'll tell people a little bit about it.
Yeah, tell everyone a little bit about it.
So it's set in the Cotswolds, in a made up little village, quite a well-to-do village, and in this village there's quite a few wealthy parents, wealthy families, as well as some normal families, for want of a better word. There's a few who are kind of slightly celebrity, they're on TV. There's a celebrity chef, there's a television presenter, and a couple of others, an ex-footballer, and there's a primary school in the village, and one day, very ordinary Friday morning, some of the children and teachers are heading off to a wildlife park just on a school day trip just before Easter, and they head off and they get waved off on the minibus in the morning, and later that afternoon, as the parents gather at the school to collect their children, the bus does not return. So Class 3B have, it seems, simply vanished. The book is sort of told from multiple points of view. You get the police investigation side of things, and then you get viewpoints from, is it three? Again, I'm writing the next book. I think there are three or four different families, and you get their sort of viewpoints on the fact that their children have gone missing, and then sort of secrets start to emerge, and it's really it's really tricky to say much more, but yes, Class 3B have vanished, and it's what happens, it's the aftermath of that, and what's behind it all. And I was really scared about this book because it is told from multiple points of view, and I know that some people don't like that. But actually, it's been out for 4 weeks and it has over 1,000 Amazon reviews already, which is incredible. And most people seem to be okay with the multiple point of view, so that's really good. So I'm really relieved about that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't second guess that, can you?
No.
Right.
But I've never done it before, really, so I was a bit nervous about it. But yeah.
Did you find it hard to juggle the story when you were telling it through so many different perspectives?
I've got, I mean, looking at it right now, I can't really show you, but in front of me I have this massive notice board. I'm really old school when it comes to writing, and I had all the families on the board and all of the, what was going on with all the families. So I kind of had it in front of me all the time. So it wasn't that hard actually to keep it straight in my head. But obviously I was concerned that readers won't have my massive board in front of them. So I thought, oh no. I did notice one book blogger said that she made notes of all the families, so that was very organized. But actually most people seem to be okay with it. So yeah, it kind of worked. I don't know if I do it again, but it worked. I think it was okay.
It's nice to I did this with the assistant. I know you did it with this book as well, to challenge yourself. I think we're both in a similar position in that we've published a few books and we both wanted to do something a bit different, and also, as if it wasn't hard enough, make it even more of a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. It's nice to try different things. I've done first person and third person, and now sort of multiple points of view, and so it is fun to shake it up a bit. You get bored otherwise, don't you?
It is, and I must say that I couldn't work it out. I don't. Obviously, I did by the end, but as I was reading, and not until I was supposed to did I think, oh my goodness. And I do try as a reader. I know some people really, really want to guess stuff and try and work it out, and I have had people say to me that they've guessed the twist in The Assistant. Right?
Oh, I didn't guess.
How did you do that?
No.
I think one person said it, because I didn't know until I got to that point that I was even going to do it. So I think I don't try as a reader to guess. I want to sort of go with it. But at the same time, there are certain books that you read and it's just so obvious you do guess. But with yours, it just kept me guessing because there were so many different people. So you had it was a bit like a sort of a classic whodunit. You have all these different people, don't you? It's like 1 minute, okay, it's them. I know it's them. And it's like, no, it isn't. It's them. So yeah, that was great. I was going to ask you about the TV presenter.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to ask you who, but did you have somebody in your head when you were writing that person?
I think he might have been an amalgamation of several of the traits of several people that I have met in my TV work. But no, I did my very early books. I did base some characters on real life people, and then I just thought I need to stop doing that because I'm going to get in trouble. So I sort of stopped doing that. But no, I guess like you, I'm very much of a magpie when it comes to character traits and so on. And you listen to people all the time, don't you? When you think you make little mental notes, well, that's an interesting thing to maybe give a character in one of my books. So I think almost subconsciously you absorb character traits and ways of speaking and things that people do, and they end up somehow coming together. And it's only when you put a character in a book sometimes that I realize, oh gosh, that's a bit like so and so. It's interesting.
And then they become real as well. I mean, for me, Gail and Riz is still out there somewhere doing their thing.
Yeah. Oh,
they are real people to me now.
100%. And just going back to yours for a second, that twist is phenomenal. The twist at the end, towards the end, the one that I won't say, but it's so good, and I definitely didn't guess it.
Oh, thank you.
No, it's really, really good.
Thank you. So let's have a look at our next question, which is, we might have covered this. So, what is your favourite part of your book, The Vanishing Class of 3B? Or you could have favourite character if you like, I think.
I'm really bad at questions like this because I forget.
Can I say what mine?
Yeah, you go.
What you're thinking? Yeah. So
my
it's a funny one. I don't think you'll guess that I would like this the best. But my favourite character is the head teacher, because she's only like a little bit, but she just peppered through.
Yeah.
I had such a sense of her like angst, and I felt so sorry for her, like she's trying to deal with the police, and like it must be like every head teacher's worst nightmare, like the whole school pretty much go missing, you know. It's like, and I just felt so sorry for her, and I thought she was so real. She sort of gave me goosebumps when she came in. I thought, oh no.
Oh, that's really good. Oh, that's really nice. I kind of forgot about her, but yeah, she's all right, I suppose. I don't think I have a favourite character now in that book. I don't know. I kind of, because none of them are very nice, you see. Although nice people are a bit more boring to write, aren't they? So none of the characters in The Vanishing are particularly endearing, I would say. I enjoyed writing. I tell you what, I enjoyed writing Reynolds. He is the TV presenter, and he's quite a major character in the book. And he's a bit of a. He's got a bit.
Yeah.
It may obviously not. It's so funny that I didn't think about that until you
He's
said
called
it.
Reynolds without an S, which
yeah.
is and that's his Christian name, which is a brilliant first name. Yeah.
He's called Reynolds Lyon. Yeah, and he's this kind of in his 50s, mid-50s television presenter with a bit of a past. His wife's 20 years younger, that kind of guy. And I liked writing him, but I didn't like him. I think that's as close as I can get to a favourite character, I think.
Was there a scene that you really enjoyed writing?
I enjoyed writing. Oh no, I did, but I can't. Yeah, I did enjoy writing one particular scene, but I actually can't really tell you what it was.
Can't say.
Oh, this is a terrible. This is an awful question. Do you think we should move on?
We should move on. So the next question is, I think we've covered tell us your path to becoming a writer. So the one after that is, what is your favourite part of writing? I know sometimes we as writers can be a bit moany about writing. Like, I've got a deadline, I've got to do this. But what's the best bit for you?
You go first on this one. You tell me. Yeah.
So I like the stage I'm at the moment, which is that I have a first draft. So I finished a first draft just before I went away on a holiday. Jackie's just come back from a holiday. I just came back from a holiday a couple of weeks ago. And before I went away, I do another job. So I work as an author coach at the Novelry. So I was very busy with that. So I knew that I had a couple of weeks before I went away where I probably wouldn't write. Then a couple of weeks while I was away that I promised I wouldn't write because it was our anniversary. So I said, no, I'm definitely going to take the time off. I'm not going to work. And so I knew that I had to have a month off. And I find this really, really difficult as a writer. I like to continually be in touch with the book when I'm writing it. But I knew that I'd have to take a month off. So I got it to that horrible sort of messy first draft, little bit short on word count stage. And just before we went away, my editor emailed and said, are you still okay? Your deadline on your back? I said, yeah, that'll be fine. And it will be. So I knew that I had about 6 weeks after I got back from holiday to come back with fresh eyes. And this is absolutely my favourite part because I've got that horrible kind of like white knuckle ride of the bear page every day. I've got the story down. I know the characters. I've started to really like them. As in like writing them. I sort of know the plot. It's still a bit shonky in places. It needs smoothing. And I'm going in for, ostensibly it's still the first draft because it will go to my editor as the first draft, but it's kind of the second draft where I'm ironing out all those little knotty things, but also starting to see all those little opportunities that I didn't see before because I was so busy getting the story down to like weave extra little twists and extra little things in that I haven't before and have a bit of fun with the characters and everything. So that's my favourite part. What's yours?
See, mine is much earlier. Mine is actually the first few weeks of starting a new book. I just love it. My board is clear, everything's off the board, new things are going on the board. I do this weird thing where I trawl the internet for photographs of just complete strangers who I think
not famous people.
No, just like, models. Anyone. I just put into Google Images. I don't know, woman in her 20s, dark hair, Caucasian, whatever it might be, that some of the traits, and look at all these kind of models come up and all sorts of people, and then I will find one. I think that's her, and I'll print it off. So I don't really know who these people are. I'm looking at some of them now. There's a very handsome man looking with. There's a beautiful red-haired woman. There's a gorgeous Chinese lady on there.
Your next book,
for the next book, yeah. So I do that. So I just love that process of building the characters. I trawl property websites and I find the sort of homes that they live in.
Oh yeah, I love the right moves.
Print those off, yeah. So I've got pictures of. I've got a little cottage on there. I've got a really trendy London apartment on there. Lots of things, and that's my favourite bit. Building the world, building the characters. I kind of already know the rough plot at that point as well. The twists have been plotted, the beginning, the end. So those few weeks, almost before I start writing, actually, And before I've written a word, I do all of that. And that's kind of the fun bit for me. I love that. And then after that, the kind of hard work starts. I mean, I kind of love the whole process, but that's my favorite. Definitely.
It's so nice that you love the whole process, because I love the whole process. And I do occasionally get slightly annoyed when I see writers on Twitter like, oh, I've got to write today. And I think I don't want to be kind of over, you know, like, pleased that I'm a writer and grateful and everything, because it is a lot of work and there's a lot of rejection. And I think we've all sort of trod a long road to get here. But at the same time, I do really think I am lucky to be a writer, because I do love writing. And really all I ever want to do is write. And I think that that's kind of what sustains, and maybe that's what's got us here, because of that sort of tenacity, that we love writing and we want to continue writing. So no one's going to tell us that we can't, you know, we will keep going until we get there, kind of thing, which I think is lovely. Yeah,
it is. It's almost like a compulsion. I totally agree with you. And it's when I think about writing, I sometimes feel like nothing is quite right in my world if I'm not writing at some point during the week, at least. I don't write every day just because I don't have time, because of my busy job as well. But on my writing days, I have to write. It is a compulsion. And I remember, I'm a runner as well. I'm a very keen runner, as you know. And there's a quote from an American ultramarathon runner, which I really think applies to my love of writing as well, and how I feel about it. And she says, "Nothing has ever broken my heart like running has, and yet I cannot breathe without it." And I kind of feel like that about writing. You know, it can break your heart, the rejection and the hard times, but I always can't breathe without it. I feel it's part of me. And so I think you're right. I think we are very, very lucky to be able to write and to be published, which is, you know, it's a dream for so many people. And I really don't moan about it very much. I mean, it can be stressful at times, but I just genuinely love it, and I know you do as well, which is really nice.
I moan on the days when I like pull the bin bag out and it explodes all over the floor. But I don't moan about writing generally, because what I do moan about is when I can't do it, when I like everything is getting in the way and you only have like 10 minutes. That annoys me. But also I think it's quite useful sometimes, because we both have other things that we do. I do my tutoring, you do the QVC, and I do think it's very good to have that, actually, because you then prioritize your writing and you do have proper time for it, and you make use of the time rather than kind of possibly not making the most use of the time and procrastinating and having the whole day and just like doing half an hour or whatever. If you've only got half an hour, you really make it count, don't you?
Exactly. Although I do procrastinate as well, even though I haven't got time to procrastinate, really. I get sucked into cat videos on YouTube is my biggest thing, or cat videos on Instagram, or any sort of animal funny videos. They just destroy me.
We all need downtime as well, and you never miss a deadline, and I never miss a deadline, so we do get there in the end.
We do.
Have a look at what the next question is.
Yeah.
So, how important is, I'm jumping ahead slightly because we've sort of covered one as well. So, how important is a plot twist, and how do you come up with them?
Well, plot twists, I mean, for crime writers like us, they are hugely important, aren't they? I think people come to expect them, they move the story on beautifully. I like to, you know, really try and get a few in, not necessarily just one. You know, I'm a big fan of the almost last page or second last page of a book twist as well. Another little one when you think it's all over. Somebody said that about my new one, actually, about The Vanishing. Somebody messaged me and said, "You think it's all over? It is now." It took, you know, so it's just one of those things when I think plot twists are really important. And how I come up with them, I mean, it's a weird one, isn't it? How you come up. People ask this a lot, and I sort of don't really know how to answer it. I know where I want to get in a book, and then I think, well, what's the normal way to get there, and what would be kind of an off-the-wall way to get there, and I use the off-the-wall way to get there, and that's the twist, I suppose. How do you do it?
I think exactly the same, in that I think, right, I know I want to, and I think by the time we're both on like a fourth, fifth, but by the time you get to that, I think you do think there are certain, you know, it's all been done before, but there are certain mechanisms that you can use. So you can line up your suspects and everybody knows it's one of them, but they don't know which one, for instance, or you can have a kind of cloaked identity that's revealed. You can have a timeline that's different than people imagine it is. So there are certain kind of fundamental structures that you can employ. But at the same time, I always try and do the what if. So, okay, I could do it like this, but what if I did it like that?
Yeah.
Because what you want to do is you want to surprise people. So you have to surprise yourself. So you can't go with your first thoughts or your second thoughts or the comfort zone. You have to think, okay, that's good, but how can I make it even better? How can I change it up even more? And then quite often, I don't know about you, but if I've decided on something, I might then have to go back and change a few things because I think, well, it's a little bit too obvious. And then I get sort of so involved, I've no idea anymore. And then someone else has to read it, my editor or the proofreader, and just check that it lands. Someone who's never read it and doesn't know what's coming. And it was so great with the assistant because the copy editor asked a question and I knew by her asking that question at that point, she didn't know. So I thought, great, that's good. And then later on she went, I get it now. So I was like, yeah, okay, that's good.
I love my copy editor is brilliant because she, when a twist comes, she always writes duh, 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 on the side of the page, like, and it's like DUH, DUH, DUH. I think, yay, she liked that twist.
Yeah.
And does that all the time, which is really fun.
I like the little sort of smiley faces and the little sort of personalization that goes back and forth. It's really lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because again, by that point, the book is so much there that, you know, it's just like, okay, now how are other people feeling about it? I need someone else to read it, you know, and not know it as well and see what they think. Brilliant.
Exactly.
So twists, super important in our genre.
You know, I'm just trying really hard not to scratch a mosquito bite on my forehead. That's something that I've just stop it. Don't let me do that.
Don't do it. You have to have oven gloves taped to your hands.
I know, I'm covered in bites. It's horrific. So I'm just sitting well back so nobody can see the throbbing second head growing on my forehead.
We can't see it. You're fine. Okay, so which of your characters do you think you'd be friends with? So I guess this can be from any of our books.
Oh, now I'm looking at my books lined up here. What have you got? Have you got an instant thought about yours?
Well, I'd like to be friends with Riss because I really like her house. Like, her house is amazing. So when I decided that, because it was a slight shift for me, because my previous 3 books were set in the Cotswolds, and I decided this one was going to be set in London. It was going to be very aspirational, just because I love the whole right move thing. And so I went up to London. I walked around that area of Belgravia. So I would really like to live in one of those houses. Riss is an acquired taste, I guess. So maybe I wouldn't spend all my time with her, but I'd really like to spend a day with her. But I think a lot of my characters, I'm kind of like, there's a character in Lying to You that I really liked. She's called Jess, and I did feel a lot of sympathy for her. And in Close to Me, I suppose because then Close to Me went on and had another life as a TV series. And I've kind of sort of kept in touch with Connie Nielsen, who starred in
you're such
so I still have a lot of affection for that character.
Yeah, she was great. Yeah,
because it's still sort of around, it's still being shown, and it's still on TVs and everything. So she's sort of not only in my head, but she's still there. So how about you?
I'm going to come back because I want to ask you about your TV series in a minute. I mean, I watched it and I know how good it was, but for the benefit of others, I don't know. I'm looking at my books and I think maybe Gemma from The Perfect Couple, which was my sort of first bestseller, and I have an affection for weirdly, that's not my favorite book of mine. My favorite book that I've written is Am I Guilty, which was my first psychological thriller. But The Perfect Couple kind of changed my life in a way, and it took off. And Gemma that's about a couple called Gemma and Danny. And Danny, Gemma comes home from a work trip and Danny has gone. And it's what happens after that. And I just have so much sympathy for Gemma. And also she was an ex-journalist like me. Although somebody in a recent review said for an ex-journalist, she spends a lot of time crying and not a lot of time being a journalist.
Well, her husband
she was in a bit. She was having a tough time, the poor girl.
She really was, yeah.
So I have a little bit of an affection for Gemma, and also her dog. Dog whose name I've forgotten. I think he might be called Albert. I've forgotten his name. I wrote it so many years ago now.
I read the book, but I can't remember the name. No, but the dog was great. It's in Bristol, isn't it? Around Bristol, that book.
Yeah, that was set in Bristol. Yeah, where I used to work. Yeah. So there wasn't meant to be a dog in that book, interestingly, but my editor at the time thought that Gemma was very lonely, and she said you need to give her either a baby or a dog. And I thought, well, a baby throws far too many complications into the plot, so I thought she can have a dog. So there we go. Oh, because I'm just conscious of the time. We've been talking for nearly 40 minutes already. Your TV series, I mean, you know, we've talked about this many times. Close to Me became a Close to Me?
Yeah.
That's what it's called, yeah. Sorry, brain fog there. Became a TV series with Christopher Eccleston, and you know, all of us in our Gloucestershire group were so excited by this and so thrilled. And it's one of those, you know, as a writer, a bucket list thing. I think that you just, you know, I want a #1 book, and I want this and that and that. And you never think that can happen, and it happens. How did you feel the day you found out that your book was becoming a TV show?
Well, I don't know. There was a day. I suppose there was a day when I knew it was definitely happening. So if your book is optioned for production, that's the first thing. So that was tremendously exciting, because that happened right at the start. The book wasn't even finished. It was pitched in a meeting as an idea, happened to fit the person who was really looking for something like that. And it was just one of those serendipitous moments. And then there was a long time when nothing really seemed to happen, and everybody said, oh, loads of books are optioned, you know, just forget it. Don't think it's going to happen, because it probably won't. And yeah, I still sort of thought it would, because I was so naive, and I just thought, well, this has happened and obviously it's going to go on and get made. So every now and then I would contact my agent and say, is there any news? She'd say, no, just forget about it. You know, I'll tell you if anything's going to happen. So between that first point and the day when I actually was told was quite a long time. So it sort of ebbed and flowed a bit. And then I got this email saying, I think we're going to hear something tomorrow. And I was like, what? And she was like, we're going to hear that it's been greenlit, which means they're actually going to make it. And at that point I thought, seriously, no, this isn't going to happen. And I almost sort of denied it. And I'd had some, you know, there'd been some changes, and then they were talking about the casting, and then Christopher Eccleston's name came up, and I was like, you know, and I remember watching him and our friends in the north and stuff, and then they were talking about Connie. I was like, well, that's Gladiator, you know, this is ridiculous, this is crazy. And I was going to meetings and meeting people, and it was just phenomenal. So it was very, very exciting, but it all just felt very surreal, really. And because I didn't write the script, I was quite sort of distanced. I had some involvement, but it was also through COVID, so there was that separation as well. So now I'm like super greedy and just want another one, which is crazy.
It's still on my list. I know that some of my books have been looked at and considered, but so far it's not happened. But you know, hey.
Oh, absolutely. And I always say to people, you know, because it happens to me, don't think it won't happen, because it does. You know, it's like, you know, getting published. You think there's such a small chance of so many people trying, but if you're not in the game, then you're not gonna necessarily, you know, win. So, you know, just keep the hope, I would definitely say. And your book's been so popular, and I could absolutely see them on TV. That would be fantastic. So
I don't know, but again, no, that the fact that it happened to you is what I think made all of us in our, you know, in our Gloucestershire writers group so kind of happy and excited, because I think it really does happen. And look at it, and it's amazing. And Amanda wrote it, and said, you know, based on the book by Amanda Reynolds on the telly, and we were all like,
yeah. So we've sort of come full circle, which is really nice, because I think because we talked at the beginning about, like, you know, local writers and like supporting each other, and it's just lovely, isn't it, that there is that big support group, not just locally where we can physically meet up, but I think online as well, social media. I think writers, particularly crime writers, are so supportive of one another. You know, they share books coming out, and they congratulate each other, and people talk about this sort of comparisonitis, and, you know, people getting upset that someone's got something. I've never experienced that. You know, I've always been pleased with people, and people have always been pleased for me. It's just been very, very supportive.
And it was one of the things that actually I think possibly surprised me the most when I became a writer, because, you know, coming from the world of television, where it's not necessarily as supportive in some ways. I have some very, very good friends in television, and now it's very different. But in my news days, it was competitive. You know, everyone's competing for the same story and all of that. So it wasn't really that supportive thing. It was like competition every single day. And for some reason, I thought writing would be the same. I thought, you know, gosh, other crime writers will be all sort of competitive. Could not have been more wrong. It is the most supportive, lovely thing ever. I suppose when you think about it, you know, if you're a reader, you don't just read one book in your life, do you? You read all the time. So there's room for all of us.
Exactly. And, you know, there is room. There is always room for good books. You know, people worry about where publishing's going in terms of lots of changes afoot and AI and all of that. But I think in terms of good quality human content, you know, that speaks to people, there is always room for everybody. And there's lots of different ways to do it now. And never a sort of a time that you can't start writing and be published. As we both said, you know, we're both in our late 40s and published in our 50s and continue to be published. So yeah, long may it rain. I think that the more mature woman has a lot to say, and hopefully a lot of people want to read it. So thanks so much, Jackie. I think, Jenna, that we are almost at time. This is very professional of me. It's almost like I am a TV presenter, Jackie. I'm looking at the time and thinking it's almost 45 minutes. Have we got time for one more question, Jenna, or are we wrapping up now? Oh, Jenna says we have time for one more question. Okay. So I'm going to ask the last question, which is, how are you celebrating National Crime Reading Month?
Oh, well, I'm doing this, which is great. I haven't actually got anything formal, but I am I'm going to be through the month recommending. I started it because I have an Instagram book club, I should say, which anyone's welcome to come along to. It is now bi-monthly actually. And it started off as a weekly thing during lockdown and then went monthly, and now it's bi-monthly. But I started off with this month's book club by recommending a whole load of new crime writers to people, because I do find in my book club it is a popular genre. We try to read other genres, but I'm so drawn back to crime always. So I think through the month I'm going to carry on doing that. I'm reading a lot of crime this month. I always do, that's nothing new, but probably solely I'll read crime this month, and I'm going to be recommending more on my social media, more crime writers. And just generally supporting other crime writers, I think, and reposting their, you know, their book news and all of that sort of thing. I mean, it's kind of what we do anyway, but maybe a little bit more, and focusing on crime this month. What about you? Are you doing any other events or anything?
No, I've got my deadline. So I'm going to be finished. Yeah, so for National Crime Reading Month, I'm going to be definitely reading like you, and also writing every single day. So we do quite a lot of the novelry in terms of I run the crime and suspense workshops there, and I also look after the crime and suspense authors, which is brilliant. So definitely be doing stuff there. But in terms of me, I am currently reading, this is something I was also going to ask you about. I'm currently reading a book by Karen Hamilton, who is a brilliant crime author, and she has got a new book coming out. So I'm reading that at the moment. That's called The Contest. And it's a really, really good idea. It's about a sort of a family. It's a bit Succession vibes, which is great because I'm definitely mourning the loss of Succession. So it's covering that for me, and it's about this sort of action. In fact, I think you'd really like it, Jackie, because it's about this action adventure holiday where they have to summit Kilimanjaro. So I think it might actually, you know, sort of work quite well for you in terms of your running as well and your sport. So I'm really enjoying that and writing. What are you reading at the moment? Is there you've just been on holidays and maybe you had a chance to read there? Yeah.
I read a couple of books, but one book I read, and you know, as authors, we're very lucky we get sent books which are not out yet. But this one is coming out on the 29th of June, and it's by the lovely Sarah Edgehill, who you know as well.
I do.
And she has written a fantastic book called The Bad Wife, which is about a woman who basically briefly bumps into a GP at the surgery, and then sees his photo sometime later in the local newspaper and becomes obsessed with him and starts to wiggle her way into his life and befriends his partner. And it's just like a tale of obsession. And it's just brilliant. Obsession and the subsequent dramatic deterioration of a life, and it's very, very good. And I was really gripped by it on television on holiday. So that's the one I've just finished. So it's called The Bad Wife, and I think it's the 29th of June that it's coming out, so not long.
And that's Sarah Edgehill.
Good.
So Sarah Edgehill. And so in terms of books that you've loved, not just in National Crime Reading Month, but generally, do you have a kind of a top 3 or a favourite book?
I'd say more authors, to be honest. I have authors that I read every single one of their books, and I don't even care. I don't even look to see what the book's about because I know I love it. And that applies to Harriet Tice, who I think is just absolute genius. Ian Rankin, who is one of my sort of heroes, basically. He really inspired me as a younger writer because it took him 8 books before he had a breakthrough book and became a bestseller. So he carried on. And Harlan Coben as well. I just think is incredible. And one of my best moments of my writing career so far was when my book, his book was at number 1 on Amazon in the UK, and mine was at number 2 for about a week, and then I knocked him off number 1. And he sent me a message, and I was just so shocked. It was one of the best days of my life, because at the time I think I had 21 of his books on my bookshelf. And it was just the best moment ever. What about you? Have you got a go-to?
Well, I always say that my favourite book is The Great Gatsby. I don't tend to read books more than once, but that is a book that I do go back to. It's obviously a novella, so it's quite a short read. And I just think it's so beautiful. And it's another tale of obsession. And I do find obsession incredibly appealing in terms of our genre for psychological thriller. It seems to often feature. In terms of authors I know are a safe pair of hands, Sabine Durrant. I just love Sabine Durrant. So I read Sun Damage, and then I went back and read Lie With Me. But all of her books, I think, it's not even necessarily what the book's about, which I think is what you were saying. It's just the way that it's written is so, it's not literary, it's just very, very, very well observed. And she kind of pulls you in to these situations that just get worse and worse and worse. And you think, oh, where is this going? And I think probably the book that really got me into reading crime and writing crime was Girl on the Train.
Yeah.
Started writing crime, but I didn't really know what I was doing, and I didn't know why I loved it so much. And then I read that book and I thought, this is how I want to write. If I can write anywhere near as kind of pacey as this is what I love to read, and this is what I want to write. And it was one of those books where I just kept saying, oh, just be 5 more minutes, I'll get up in a minute from bed, or I'll eat my lunch in half an hour. I just had to keep reading it until I got to the end. So I loved that book.
Good choice. And now we've been talking for over 51 minutes, which I think we're going to get.
Oh, Jenna, we need to be finishing now, or do we? Yes, all good, she says.
Okay.
I don't know if Jenna, are we 45 minutes or are we an hour?
I think it was meant to be 45, wasn't it?
Oh, she says we're an hour, so we're okay.
Oh, we're an hour. Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, we were both under the impression we were 45 minutes.
You.
I don't know.
Fine, we've got loads of time.
We've got loads of time. Okay, so oh, this is quite a hard one, actually. This is why I missed it out.
Go on then.
So yeah, it's hard, but anyway, I'm going to slightly amend it. So the question says, describe what makes a thriller interesting to read in 1 word. But I don't think you have to keep to 1 word if you don't want to. I'm going to give you a minute to think, because I have had time to think and I've written my word down. So my word is suspense.
Yeah.
So just to expand upon my 1 word, I think when we read psychological thrillers, obviously the psychological element of it is that we're really interested in what's making people tick, and we're trying to work them out, and we're trying to understand their motivations for doing the things that the rest of us don't do. It's that difference between stepping over the line and not stepping over the line. And the suspense part comes from that, is trying to work out what's going to happen and why they're going to do it. So you talked earlier about having not just 1 twist, but having a number of twists through the book. And it's that kind of breadcrumb trail that we have to lead people along, so that they're picking up the clues, they're getting the reward. You're not making them wait the whole book. I'm sure we've all read books where I'm just reading this because I want to know, but I'm not actually interested, I'm not enjoying it. But the enjoyment is that sort of rewards along the way. So I think eking out that suspense, but also giving people something to kind of pick up and be rewarded with along the way.
Yeah, that is a good word, and you've taken it now, and I can't have it.
That's why I had
it. It's annoying. I'm trying to think what makes it. I mean, I'm going to throw in cliffhangers as a word, because what I do try to do is to have almost every chapter end on a little mini cliffhanger, and I know from my readers that is what keeps them turning the pages. And you know, it's very apt that my imprint of HarperCollins that I'm published with is called One More Chapter, because it's just that thing when you're reading a book and you go, oh, just one more chapter, and then I'll turn the light off and go to sleep. And I try. And I get a lot of people saying, I read your book in like 2 sittings or in 2 days or whatever.
Do you mind that, or do you like that?
No, I actually love that. And, you know, I don't write great, literary, beautiful prose. And maybe I could have tried. I've never tried. I know what I write. I write commercial crime fiction that is fast reads, it's beach reads, it's holiday reads, it's reads in bed at night. Most people seem to read my books in 2 or 3 days or a couple of sittings. And I'm fine with that. You know, I'm fine with that. There are plenty of books out there that you can savor and enjoy and that are beautifully written and all of that. You know, like we were saying before, there's space for all of us. And so, no, I actually like that when people tell me I read it in 2 days or I read it in, you know, somebody said they read it in 1 day. My goodness. Not much else to do that day.
I've never read a book in 1 sitting, but I am full of admiration for people who do.
I know.
They're superpower. Yeah, it's amazing. So there's always so many books that I want to read, and I'm actually quite a slow reader. So I do admire people who can kind of like absorb it properly in that time. I think that's brilliant. Yeah.
But yeah, so I think for me, that's what I enjoy, that kind of book as well. Books with little cliffhangers, books that you can read quickly. And also, but then, you know, you get to the end of those sort of books, I do get people also saying, oh, I sort of wished I'd savoured it a bit more because I didn't want it to end. So that's nice as well. So I think for my kind of thriller, the cliffhanger thing, I think, is good, but also suspense is an excellent word. And yes, I think we both have both cliffhangers and suspense in our books.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think that yours are also incredibly well written. I think you're doing yourself a disservice. I think they're beautifully written.
Thank you.
So before we finish up, are you able to give people who are watching any kind of a tease about what you're writing at the moment?
This is such a good question because today, my editor and I have agreed on a name and a shout line, as they say, for the new book, but I don't think I'm allowed to say it yet. The book, how do I sum it up? My book opens with a woman who is in prison for a crime, which is really difficult, isn't it? I don't know if I'm allowed to give anything away.
Don't give anything away you don't want to. Just maybe just do the one word thing again, and it can be as choose or as anything if you want.
Do you know? I'm just going to say it's about a woman who's in prison. It's about a friend of hers who's not in prison, and it's about a man who connects the two. That's as close as I can get, I think, at the moment. But I think we'll be revealing a bit more very, very soon. It's just I think I'd get in big trouble. What about you? Can you tell me any more than that?
I have no idea if I'm allowed to, but I will anyway. So my next book is, I didn't ask you when yours is out, actually. When's yours?
I don't have a date, but they're usually around April, May time. So probably next year. It'll be next year.
Next year. Yeah, mine's sort of early next year as well.
Yeah.
So my next book, again, it's an aspirational house. And because I really want a swimming pool, and there's no way that I can ever have a swimming pool, not unless I move house because my garden isn't big enough, or I have no garden. So I've given it a swimming pool because I really am obsessed with having a swimming pool because I love to swim. And let's just say that maybe somebody ends up floating. Oh, maybe.
I like. Hey, that's
all I'm going to say.
Okay, great. And that's out early next year as well.
Yeah, I think it's out in January, in fact. So
quite early.
Quite early next year.
Cool.
Yes, I'm very excited about that one now that it's started.
Excellent.
Together.
When's your deadline then? Quite soon, did you say?
1st of July.
Oh, that's quite
early. It will be well. It will.
Of course it will.
It will. Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jackie. As always, absolute pleasure talking to you and finding out all about your writing process.
Likewise.
Book. And Jenna, thank you for hosting us. And anybody who came along, if you've got questions, I think that we have an opportunity to answer those afterwards. So if you wanted to ask us anything, and yeah, hopefully everybody's enjoyed listening to us during National Crime Reading Month and enjoyed our books. And
yeah, thank you everyone for leading questions there, Amanda, as well. It's been lovely as always, and thank you to Jenna from me too.